The Galactic Council chamber hung above a dying blue star, its light bleeding through crystal walls and casting long shadows across 1,000 gathered species. This was where wars were approved. This was where civilizations were erased with votes and signatures. Today, the chamber was loud. Holographic banners burned in the air, showing the same image from every angle. Earth. A small blue planet. Fragile. Alone. They delayed us for centuries. One admiral sneered, his armored mandibles clicking with irritation. All those warnings. All that noise. And this is what they were protecting. Laughter rippled across the chamber. Humanity has been discussed for generations. A strange species from a dangerous world. Violent history. Endless wars. Then silence. No expansion. No threats. No presence in the galactic order. Forgotten. At the center of the chamber stood a single human. The envoy did not wear armor. No weapons. No symbols of rank. Just a dark uniform and tired eyes. He stood alone beneath the weight of 1,000 stares. The Armada is ready, announced the High Strategist. 10,000 warships. Enough firepower to shatter your planet 10 times over. More laughter. The human did not raise his voice. Earth requests one thing, he said calmly. That you do not come. The chamber erupted. Mockery. Insults. Even pity. You are too late, the High Strategist replied. Your world lies outside protected space. You offer nothing of value. Your defenses are obsolete. Your people are divided. The human nodded once, as if he had expected this. Then hear this, he said. If your fleet enters our system, you will not return. Silence fell, brief, sharp, uncomfortable. Then laughter again, louder this time. A counselor leaned forward. Is that a threat? No, the human said. It is a warning. The High Strategist waved a claw dismissively. Escort him out. The envoy turned before the guards reached him. As he walked away, he spoke one last time, his words broadcast unintentionally across the chamber. We will not chase you. We will not negotiate. We will not ask again. The doors closed behind him. Moments later, the Armada launched. Across the galaxy, jump gates flared as the greatest invasion force ever assembled moved toward a single star system. Confidence ran high. Victory was assumed. This was not a war. It was a demonstration. Then, far away, something strange happened. In the outer dark of the Sol system, ancient objects woke up. Human satellites long thought dead activated one by one. Power surged through structures buried deep inside asteroids. Signals older than most civilizations pulsed through space, ignored by alien sensors that were not designed to see them. The invading fleet exited hyperspace in perfect formation. Immediately, the forward scouts vanished. No explosion, no debris, no warning. Just gone. Report, the flagship commander demanded. Static answered. Then I panic. Navigation systems drifted. Star maps no longer aligned. Space itself seemed wrong, too quiet, too still. This is impossible, an officer said. There are no human fleets on record. No defensive platforms. Scan again, the commander snapped. They did, and found nothing. Earth hung ahead of them, blue and silent. No fleets. No orbital weapons. No cities visible from space. Abandoned, someone said. They ran. Relief spread through the command deck. Then the planet moved. Not physically, but energetically. Deep beneath its surface, power readings spiked beyond anything the galaxy had ever measured. The moon shifted slightly, its orbit adjusting by fractions that triggered alarms across every alien ship. Weapons locked automatically, then unlocked themselves. Targeting systems refused commands. Commander, an officer whispered, we're being watched. Across the fleet, sensors detected massive shapes emerging from the void. Not ships, not structures, foundations, as if space itself had been built around Earth. A signal spread through the Armada, overriding every channel. No language, no symbols, just a simple pulse. One beat, then another, like a heartbeat. The flagship's main screen flickered. Earth's surface lit up, not with cities, but with lines. Deep scars across continents. Old, intentional. The commander felt something he had never felt before. Fear. Prepare an emergency jump, he ordered. The engines did not respond. Behind the fleet, space folded. Something vast shifted position, unseen but undeniable. And deep beneath Earth's crust, systems humanity built in silence finished waking up. The alien flagship drifted in silence, surrounded by 10,000 warships that suddenly felt very small. No explosions followed the disappearance of the forward scouts. No debris cloud. No energy flare. They had not been destroyed in any way the galaxy understood. They had simply ceased. Re-establish contact. The fleet commander ordered again, his voice sharper now. Use tight beam, quantum relay, anything. The officers worked frantically. Consoles flickered. Data scrolled, corrected itself, then vanished. No response, the communications chief said. All scout identifiers are gone. Not inactive. Not destroyed. Gone from the network entirely. That word hung heavy in the command deck. Gone. The commander turned his gaze back to the main display. Earth filled the screen, blue, calm, beautiful. A living world. The kind of world wars were fought over. Yet it looked wrong. Too clean. Too quiet. Long-range scans, he said. I want a full tactical picture. The sensor officer hesitated. We already ran full scans twice. There are no orbital defense platforms. No shipyards. No active fleets. Their technology signatures are primitive. Murmurs spread across the deck. Relief tried to return. Then the scouts suffered a malfunction. An admiral said, forcing confidence into his voice. Human equipment is unstable. Their history is chaotic. Push forward. The fleet advanced. The moment they crossed the heliopause, alarms erupted again. Not weapons warnings. Not shields. Physics alerts. Local gravity shifted by decimals that should not exist. Time dilation spiked and then normalized. Navigation stars moved, only slightly, but enough to scramble jump calculations. This system is engineered, the sensor officer whispered. What? The commander snapped. Not defended. Built. The mass distribution doesn't match natural models. Asteroids are hollow. Their cores are active. Something inside them just acknowledged us. As if summoned by the words, a distant object changed course. An asteroid the size of a city rotated, exposing a surface no telescope had ever recorded. Smooth. Artificial. Covered in lines that glowed faintly as power surged through them. Weapons across the fleet auto-targeted. Then shut down. What is happening to our fire control? The admiral demanded. No override works. The weapons officer replied, panic creeping in. It's like the system refuses to lock. Human interference? Someone asked. The commander stared at the readings. No, this isn't hacking. This is permission being denied. Ahead, Earth rotated slowly, its night side turning toward them. Cities did not light up. Instead, something else did. Deep beneath the planet's crust, energy levels rose. Old scars across the continents, visible only now under new wavelengths, began to glow faintly. Not random. Connected. A planet-wide pattern. These markings, the sensor officer said quietly. They're not damaged. What are they? The commander asked. The officer swallowed. They're seams. The fleet slowed without orders. Fear crept in, quiet and contagious. Centuries of doctrine said humans were dangerous because they were emotional. Violent. Short-lived. But emotional species did not build things like this. A transmission suddenly pierced the fleet's internal channels. Not a broadcast. Not an attack. A record. The image of the human envoy appeared, older footage, taken years ago during a previous council session. If you are seeing this, the envoy said calmly, then you ignored the warning. The message cut to archival visuals. Earth centuries ago. Cities burning. Wars are raging. Missiles crossing skies. Humanity is tearing itself apart again and again. Then the images changed. Construction. Massive underground chambers. Generations working in silence. Entire continents hollowed carefully, deliberately. The envoy's voice continued. We learned early that fleets invite retaliation. Empires collapse. Borders fail. So we chose something simpler. The image zoomed out. Earth, wrapped in layers of invisible systems. We made home, unapproachable. The transmission ended. Panic finally broke through discipline. This was planned, an admiral hissed. They expected us. The commander clenched his claws. Every species prepares defenses. This isn't defense, the sensor officer said. This is a trap that's been waiting centuries. Behind the fleet, space rippled again. Something enormous shifted position, still unseen, but its gravitational effect registered across every ship. A second scout wing vanished. This time, the fleet saw it happen. One moment, dozens of ships held formation. The next, space folded inward, collapsing like water down a drain. No explosion, no flash, just absence. Screams filled the command channel. Emergency jump. Now, the commander ordered. The engines roared. Nothing happened. Jump drives failed one by one, their cores flooding with error states that made no sense. It was as if the universe itself rejected the request. The fleet was trapped. Earth finally transmitted live. No music, no threats, no emotional plea. Just the human envoy again, older now, his eyes steady. "You crossed the line," he said. "This system is no longer neutral." The commander leaned toward the screen. "What do you want?" The envoy did not answer immediately. "We want exactly what we asked for before," he said at last. "For you not to be here." The feed cut. The moon moved. Not dramatically, not violently. It adjusted its orbit by a precise margin. The effect was catastrophic. Gravitational waves tore through the formation. Smaller ships collided. Larger vessels lost orientation. Shields flared uselessly as internal systems failed under forces they were never designed to endure. "This is impossible," an admiral whispered. "You can't weaponize the moon." "You can," the sensor officer replied, voice hollow. "If you spent centuries figuring out how." Around the fleet, the asteroids awakened fully. Panels opened. Structures unfolded. Entire weapon systems revealed themselves. Not guns, not missiles, but mechanisms that bent space, redirected energy, and erased mass with clinical efficiency. No warning shots. No speeches. The first full salvo struck. Entire battle groups disappeared in synchronized silence, removed from reality as if they had never existed. The commander watched fleet markers vanish by the hundreds. This was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Earth did not advance. Earth did not pursue. Earth simply stood still and let the system do what it was built to do. As alarms screamed and the Armada collapsed, one thought burned through the commander's mind with brutal clarity. Humanity had never planned to fight a war here. They had designed an ending, and the galaxy had just stepped into it. Silence followed the destruction. Not the calm silence of peace, but the hollow absence left when sound itself had been torn away. Where entire battle groups once held formation, there was nothing. No wreckage. No radiation cloud. No drifting corpses. Just empty space where thousands of lives had existed seconds earlier. The alien flagship's command deck had fallen quiet. Every officer frozen in place, staring at a tactical display that no longer made sense. Fleet strength indicators were collapsing faster than the system could update them. "Confirm losses," the commander said at last, his voice low, strained. The tactical officer's hands shook as he worked the console. We can't. Ships aren't registering as destroyed. They're not registering at all. It's as if they were never launched." The implication was worse than annihilation. They were not losing ships. They were being erased from history. Another wave of gravitational distortion rippled through the fleet. Massive cruisers rolled end over end, their inertial dampeners overwhelmed. Smaller vessels shattered as internal structures tore themselves apart, trying to obey physics that no longer applied. "This system isn't just hostile," the sensor officer said, his voice barely audible. "It's controlled. Every variable. Every constant." The commander clenched his jaw. "By what?" The officer looked at Earth on the main screen. "By them." Earth rotated slowly, indifferent to the chaos unfolding around it. Clouds drifted. Oceans shimmered. It looked like a peaceful world, one that had no right to be doing this. And yet, power readings from the planet continued to rise. Deep beneath its crust, systems humanity had buried long before the galaxy learned to fear them were synchronizing. Ancient reactors fed energy into planet-wide networks. Lunar arrays adjusted alignment. Stellar collectors near the sun began redirecting raw solar output into invisible channels. The Sol system was waking up as a single machine. A junior officer broke the silence. "Commander, I'm detecting something inside the star." The commander turned sharply. "Explain." "Not inside," the officer corrected, eyes wide. "Around it. Structures. They've been there for centuries, hidden in the solar corona. They're active now." The screen shifted, showing the system's star, not as a ball of fire, but as a node. Anchored, surrounded by shapes that bent light and space. "Those aren't weapons," an admiral muttered. "They're regulators." The sensor officer nodded slowly. They're controlling output, gravity, radiation, time gradients. The commander felt his breath catch. The humans hadn't just fortified their planet. They had mastered their star. Another transmission cut through the chaos. This one was not directed at the fleet alone. It was broadcast outward, wideband, unencrypted, unstoppable. Across nearby systems, alien outposts, and civilian relays picked it up. The human envoy appeared once more. "We warned you," he said, not with anger, but with a quiet finality that cut deeper than rage ever could. But warnings only matter if you understand the cost of ignoring them. Behind him, the image shifted. Records, blueprints, long-dead human languages translated automatically. Humanity's past failures played out in brutal honesty. Cities destroyed by orbital bombardment, colonies wiped out by superior alien fleets in forgotten early encounters. "We were not strong enough once," the envoy continued. "So we learned." The footage changed. Human scientists debating, military leaders arguing, philosophers speaking about extinction, about survival, about the reality that the universe did not care who was right, only who endured. "We realized something the galaxy never did," the envoy said. "Defense must be absolute, or it is meaningless." The feed cut. On the flagship, panic finally became terror. "This is psychological warfare," an admiral snapped, desperate to cling to doctrine. "They're trying to break morale." "No," the sensor officer replied, voice empty. "They're explaining." A new alert screamed. The fleet's rear formations were gone. Not destroyed mid-fight. Gone between sensor ticks. Space folded again, this time visibly. Reality bent inward along invisible lines, collapsing entire volumes into nothingness. Ships caught within simply vanished, their mass converted, redirected, or removed by mechanisms no alien science had ever imagined. "This isn't firepower," the commander whispered. "This is infrastructure." The realization hit him like a physical blow. Humans were not firing weapons. They were turning systems on. A desperate signal arrived from a neighboring empire's observation post. "Sol Fleet, what is happening?" the message demanded. "We are detecting impossible energy spikes. Confirm status." The commander hesitated only a second before responding. "Do not come here," he transmitted. "Turn back. Close your gates. Forget this system exists." There was a pause. Then the reply came, strained with disbelief. "You are losing?" The commander looked at his tactical map. Where 10,000 ships once stood, less than half remained, and they were dying fast. "Yes," he said. "We never had a chance." The reply cut off abruptly as a shockwave from Sol disrupted the relay. Within the fleet, mutiny began brewing, not against leadership, but against reality itself. Orders no longer mattered. Survival instincts took over. Individual captains attempted blind jumps. Some tore their own ships apart. Others vanished instantly as space rejected them. None escaped. Earth remained silent. No taunts. No pursuit. Just systems executing their purpose. The commander's console flashed red. A final alert. Core sequence complete. Phase 3 actives. "What does Phase 3 mean?" an admiral demanded. The sensor officer didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was hollow. "It means the system has moved from containment to resolution." The planet's scars burned brighter. The moon locked into a new position, perfectly aligned with the star and the invading fleet. Space between them vibrated. "Commander," a junior officer whispered, tears streaking down his face. "I'm reading something forming ahead of us." The commander forced himself to look. A structure was unfolding, not built, but revealed. Massive, elegant, terrifying. A framework of light and gravity spanning millions of kilometers, connecting Earth, its moon, and the star into a single configuration. A weapon that was not a weapon. A mechanism designed to end presence. "This system," the sensor officer said, "is about to be reset." The commander understood then. Humanity had not built Sol to defeat invaders. They had built it to make invasion impossible. The framework ignited. Across the remaining fleet, time stuttered. Alarms froze mid-scream. The last thing the commander saw was Earth, small, blue, untouched, before space itself folded inward one final time. And far beyond Sol, across the galaxy, civilizations watching the data feeds felt a cold truth settle into their collective consciousness. Humanity has been underestimated. Not because it lacked power, but because it had learned how to wait. The framework ignited without sound. Light bent inward, folding along invisible lines that stretched between the star, the moon, and Earth itself. To the remaining alien ships, it felt as if the universe had taken a breath and decided to hold it. Time fractured. On the flagship, alarms froze mid-flash. Officers were locked in place, mouths open, commands unfinished. Even thought seemed to slow, stretching into something thick and heavy. Then it snapped back. Reality reasserted itself with brutal force. Entire sections of the fleet simply vanished. Not pulled away, not destroyed, removed. The space they had occupied collapsed cleanly, sealing itself as if nothing had ever been there. This is extinction-level technology, an admiral gasped. No species should have this. The commander did not answer. He could not look away from the tactical display as fleet markers dropped in perfect geometric patterns. Not random, deliberate. They're pruning us, he whispered. Like excess mass. The sensor officer nodded slowly. The system is optimizing, removing foreign variables. The implications settled over the command deck like a death sentence. They were not enemies. They were contaminated. A new transmission broke through, short range, automated, and unmistakably human. Not a threat, not a warning. A status update. Soul defense grid, stable foreign mass reduction, 62% complete. The commander slammed a claw against the console. They're counting us. Another ripple surged outward from the framework. This one was different, focused, directional. The remaining alien ships were pushed inward, forced into tighter formations no one had ordered. Engines fought uselessly as gravity itself rearranged their positions. They're compressing the battle space, the sensor officer said. Reducing volume. Increasing efficiency. Efficiency for what? An officer shouted. No one answered. On Earth, something changed. The planet's surface dimmed as energy was redirected. The glowing seams faded, replaced by new patterns, deep, precise, and far more controlled. This isn't the final weapon, the sensor officer realized. This is still preparation. Fear finally broke discipline completely. Open channels flooded with desperate voices. Admirals demanded explanations. Captains begged for mercy. Some screamed in fury, others in terror. Earth did not respond. Instead, the human envoy appeared again, this time not alone. Behind him stood others. Scientists, soldiers, civilians, old faces, young ones. Humanity, presented without armor or apology. We do not hate you, the envoy said, his voice steady. But we cannot allow you to exist here. The commander stepped forward, broadcasting without protocol. You're erasing an entire armada. This will start a war that never ends. The envoy met his gaze through the screen. No, he replied softly. This will end one. The feed shifted. Data flowed. Maps, projections, simulations. The Sol system displayed not as territory, but as a node in a much larger network. The commander's breath caught. This isn't isolated, the sensor officer whispered. These systems, they exist elsewhere. The envoy continued. Earth was not our first world. It was our last line. Images appeared. Dead stars, empty systems, silent planets. Each marked with faint human signatures buried deep in their structures. We learned long ago that if humanity was to survive, the envoy said, it could not be centralized. It had to be distributed. The truth hit the command deck like a physical blow. Humanity wasn't defending a home. They were defending a lattice. Across the galaxy, other human-built systems, long abandoned, forgotten, written off as relics, were waking up in quiet synchronization. Sol was not unique. It was simply the first. The fleet shook violently as another reduction wave fired. The number dropped again. Foreign mass reduction, 81% complete. The commander turned to his officers. Is there any scenario where we survive? The sensor officer stared at the data, eyes hollow. Only if they choose to stop. The commander swallowed. Then why haven't they finished us? As if answering the question, the human envoy spoke again. You came here to make an example of us, he said. So now, we will make one of you. The framework shifted configuration. The remaining ships, barely a fraction of the original armada, were suddenly stabilized. Gravity normalized. Systems returned. Time smoothed out. Hope flared, sudden and painful. They stopped. An officer breathed. No, the sensor officer said slowly. They isolated us. Space around the survivors hardened, forming a vast containment shell. Beyond it, the rest of the Sol system dimmed, withdrawing power and attention. The commander understood. "They're leaving us alive," he said. "Yes," the sensor officer replied. "So we can be seen." A final transmission went out, broadcast not just to the fleet, but to every listening civilization within range. The envoy stood alone again. "Remember this," he said. "Not as a victory, not as a threat, but as a boundary." The containment shell began to move, slowly, inexorably, pushing the surviving ships outward, away from Earth, toward the edge of the system. "We will not pursue you," the envoy continued. "We will not follow. But if you return, there will be nothing left to observe." The shell expelled them into deep space. Behind them, Sol went dark. Not dead, silent. The commander stared at the empty starfield where Earth had been. 10,000 ships had entered that system. Less than 100 had left. And they carried something far heavier than loss. They carried proof. As emergency beacons activated and distress calls flooded the void, the commander knew the galaxy would hear this story. And somewhere, in council chambers and imperial thrones far away, leaders would face a terrifying question. If humanity could do this in defense, what would happen if they ever chose offense? The survivors did not flee in formation. They drifted. The containment shell released them gently, almost respectfully, pushing the shattered remnants of the Armada beyond the Sol system's boundary before dissolving into nothing. Engines sputtered back to life one by one. Navigation systems realigned. Time stabilized. Normal space returned. But nothing felt normal. The commander stood alone on the flagship's command deck, surrounded by officers who could no longer meet his eyes. 10,000 warships had entered Sol with confidence and contempt. 93 had left, and even those were broken. "Begin full damage assessment," he ordered quietly. The tactical officer hesitated. "Commander, we are receiving incoming signals." "From whom?" The officer swallowed. "Everyone." Across the bridge, displays lit up with inbound transmissions. Imperial capitals, neutral trade hubs, fringe colonies, even rival empires that had once sworn eternal hatred now spoke with the same tone. "Fear." "They all saw it," the sensor officer said. "Or enough of it. The energy signatures, the mass losses, the silence." The commander nodded slowly. "Patch them through." He straightened as the main display shifted, filling with faces, leaders, admirals, counselors. Some looked furious. Most looked terrified. "What did you provoke?" one demanded immediately. "Explain what happened in Sol," another ordered. A third cut in sharply. "Is Earth gone?" The commander took a breath. "No," he said. "Earth is untouched." The chamber erupted into chaos. Accusations flew. Demands stacked over each other. "You failed. You triggered a catastrophe. You lied about human capabilities." The commander raised a claw. "Enough." Silence fell, strained and brittle. "You want to know what happened?" he continued. "We ignored a warning. We entered a system that was never meant to be contested. And humanity did exactly what it said it would do." A counselor leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "They wiped out an armada. That is an act of war." "No," the commander replied. "It was an act of denial." Confusion rippled through the channel. "They did not chase us," he went on. "They did not pursue victory beyond their borders. They did not threaten retaliation. They removed us, and then they stopped." The sensor officer stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "Because Sol is not a battlefield. It is a lock." That word hung in the air. "A lock," someone echoed. "Yes," the officer said. "A system designed to close permanently the moment it is forced." Murmurs spread. Some leaders scoffed. Others grew very still. Before anyone could respond, a new signal cut through every channel at once. "Humans." The envoy appeared again. Not from Sol. From everywhere. The signal was impossible, simultaneously emerging from dozens of relay points, piggybacking on existing infrastructure without interference. It was as if humanity had been listening through the galaxy's own nervous system. "This message is not a declaration," the envoy said calmly. "It is a clarification." Behind him, the image shifted to a wide view of the Sol system, now quiet, dimmed, locked down. "We understand fear," he continued. "We understand anger. We understand the instinct to strike first." Images followed. Early human colonies destroyed by alien raids. Fleets erased in humanity's first steps beyond its home star. Treaties broken. Promises ignored. We learned the cost of being unprepared, the envoy said. And we learned that mercy without strength invites extinction. A council leader leaned forward, voice trembling with controlled fury. You annihilated a fleet. That is not mercy. The envoy met the camera's gaze. No, he said. It is restraint. The commander felt a chill. We could have pursued. The envoy continued. We could have followed your surviving ships back through your gates. We could have dismantled your empire node by node. A pause. We chose not to. The galaxy held its breath. Because this was never about conquest, the envoy said. It was about permanence. The image behind him shifted again. Stars appeared, dozens, then hundreds. Systems marked faintly with human signatures, barely detectable. These are not colonies, the envoy explained. They are anchors. The realization spread like poison. They're everywhere, someone whispered. Yes, the envoy confirmed. We are. The commander watched leaders recoil from their own screens. For centuries, the envoy said, humanity expanded quietly. Not to rule, not to dominate, but to ensure that no single strike, no single war, no single decision could erase us. The screen zoomed out further. A lattice. Invisible lines connecting distant systems, forming a vast, distributed network. Soul is the heart, the envoy said, but it is not the whole body. A counselor shouted. Then this galaxy is already occupied. No, the envoy replied calmly. It is shared. Silence fell again. You have seen what happens when a boundary is crossed, the envoy continued. Consider this your last warning. The transmission ended. Not abruptly, cleanly. Across the channel, panic exploded. They're threatening us all. They control the stars themselves. We must strike before. No. The commander snapped, cutting in without waiting for permission. You must not. All eyes turned to him. I led the Armada, he said. I watched ships vanish without resistance. I watched physics itself obey human design. He leaned closer to the camera. There is no strike that reaches them first. The truth landed hard. A council leader spoke quietly. What do they want? The commander closed his eyes briefly. To be left alone, he said, and to be remembered. Far away, in the Sol system, Earth remained silent. But deep beneath its surface, new calculations ran. The system had executed Phase 3, and now it was preparing something else. Not for war. For the possibility that the galaxy would ignore the warning again. The galaxy did not sleep after the message. In council chambers, command centers, and private sanctums across 1,000 civilizations, leaders replayed the same recordings again and again. They slowed the footage, enhanced the data, ran simulations that all ended the same way. Humanity had not merely defeated an armada. They had invalidated an entire way of thinking about power. The surviving ships from Sol limped homeward, spreading fear faster than any broadcast ever could. Crews who had once believed in shields and numbers now flinched at empty space. Officers stared too long at star charts, imagining invisible lines and hidden anchors beneath every system they passed. On the flagship, the commander stood before another council. This one smaller, quieter, and far more dangerous. It was an emergency session of the inner powers. Empires that had ruled for millennia. Civilizations that had never lost a war. Their faces were grim. You claim humanity could have destroyed you completely, one ruler said. Yet they let you leave. Yes, the commander replied. And that is what terrifies me. A murmur spread. Explain. They did not seek revenge, he said. They sought comprehension. They needed the galaxy to see, to understand. And now, they are waiting. Waiting for what? Another demanded. The commander hesitated. For us to decide who we are, he said finally. That answer was not received well. In secret chambers far from public oversight, a different conversation unfolded. Fear breeds plans. Plans breed betrayal. A coalition formed quietly. Empires that believed restraint was weakness, that silence was preparation for conquest. They called themselves the Continuity Bloc, and their logic was simple. If humanity had embedded itself everywhere, then humanity had overextended. If they can defend everything, one strategist argued, then they must be thinned somewhere. They began probing, not with fleets, with whispers. Recon drones vanished near certain stars. Deep space scanners returned corrupted data. Ancient systems thought lifeless resisted analysis in subtle, maddening ways. Every test confirmed the same conclusion. Human signatures were everywhere, and nowhere precise enough to strike. Panic deepened. Then something unprecedented happened. A neutral civilization, small, old, and deeply cautious, sent a request to Sol. Not a challenge, not a demand, a question. It was a single, narrowband signal, transmitted without encryption. Why? The response came almost immediately. Not from Earth. From a relay station on the edge of known space, long assumed to be abandoned. The human envoy appeared once more. Because extinction is permanent, he said. The message spread, not as an official broadcast, not as propaganda, as a shared truth. Humanity began speaking, not with weapons, but with history. They opened archives, released records, showed the galaxy exactly what had shaped them. Their wars, their near misses, their failures, worlds burned by their own hands. Entire generations lost to pride and delay. We are not peaceful, the envoy admitted. We are not gentle, but we learned, painfully, that survival demands preparation beyond hope. Some listened, others did not. The continuity block accelerated its plans. If Sol was the heart, then perhaps the heart could still be stopped. They assembled a device, ancient, forbidden, and unstable. A star killer not meant to conquer, but to deny. To collapse Sol's star into chaos, shattering the lattice at its center. It would not be launched from nearby. It would be fired from interstellar distance, beyond any reasonable defensive perimeter. They believed this made it safe. The weapon activated. In Sol, something stirred. Deep inside the star, the human-built regulators detected the anomaly before it crossed the first light year. Calculations adjusted. Not panicking. Measured. On Earth, long-dormant facilities opened quietly. Not with alarms, but with routine. Phase for initialized. The human envoy appeared again. This time not to councils, but to the continuity block directly. We felt it, he said simply. The leaders froze. You should not have done that, he continued. Now you force us to show the part we hoped you would never need to see. The star killer fired. The energy wave raced toward Sol, tearing through space with destructive certainty. And then it slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. Space thickened around it. Time stretched. Energy bled away into invisible sinks. By the time it reached the system's outer boundary, it was no longer a weapon. It was debris. The Sol Star did not react violently. It was adjusted. A pulse echoed outward, not destructive, not aggressive. Informational. Across the galaxy, systems with human anchors activated briefly, just long enough to be noticed. A reminder. The continuity block's channels exploded with panic. They neutralized it, someone shouted. From across interstellar distance. That wasn't neutralization, another whispered. That was a correction. The human envoy spoke one last time to them. We warned you, he said, without anger. Now you will live knowing how close you came. The block dissolved within days. Leaders resigned or vanished. Empires fractured under the weight of their own fear. Across the galaxy, something fundamental shifted. Wars were paused. Borders softened. Old grudges lost urgency. Not because humanity demanded it, but because everyone now understood the same truth. There was no winning a war against a species that had turned survival into architecture. In Sol, Earth remained quiet. Cities lived. Oceans moved. Children were born who would never know how close the galaxy had come to forcing their extinction. Deep beneath the surface, systems returned to standby. Not shut down. Waiting. The galaxy adjusted its behavior. Trade routes bent around human-marked systems. Councils added new protocols. The phrase, final warning, entered every major language. And in the darkest reaches of space, where no one watched closely enough, humanity continued its work. Not building fleets. Not raising banners. But ensuring that no matter how vast the galaxy became, there would always be places where extinction stopped. The galaxy learned to move differently. After Sol, after the message, after the failed strike that never even reached its target, space itself seemed to carry a new weight. Trade lanes shifted subtly. Exploration fleets filed quieter reports. Admirals paused before approving maneuvers that once would have been routine. Not because humanity demanded it, because memory had taken hold. In the great archives of 1,000 species, Sol was no longer listed as a star system. It was listed as an outcome. The surviving commander became something he never intended to be. A witness. He was summoned constantly, by councils, by war colleges, by private gatherings of rulers who no longer trusted their own assumptions. He repeated the same story until it felt carved into his bones. We were not outmatched, he would say. We were irrelevant. That was the word that unsettled them most. Not defeated, not overpowered, irrelevant. Meanwhile, the galaxy fractured along fault lines that had always existed but were now impossible to ignore. Some civilizations embraced caution. They dismantled expansion fleets, redirected resources into diplomacy and internal stability. They marked human anchor systems on their maps with reverence, like ancient sanctuaries. Others grew bitter. The idea that a single species, once dismissed as violent and primitive, had quietly outgrown the need for conquest was unbearable. They're gods now, one warlord spat in a closed session, and gods must be challenged. From that bitterness, a new movement formed. Not an empire, an idea. They called themselves the Purists. Their belief was simple and terrifying. No species should be allowed to embed itself into the fabric of the galaxy itself. Humanity's lattice was not defense, it was occupation by other means. And if it was allowed to stand, then the future belonged to one species forever. The Purists did not announce themselves. They did not build fleets. They began with erasure. Human records vanished from shared archives. Navigation buoys near anchor systems were sabotaged. Entire historical datasets were quietly altered to remove references to Sol and its consequences. They hoped memory could be undone. In response, humanity did nothing. No broadcasts, no corrections, no warnings. That silence was worse. In Sol, Earth went on living. Cities rebuilt old districts. Children studied history that did not glorify survival, but explained it. No monuments were raised to the Armada that died. No celebration marked the day the galaxy blinked. The systems beneath the planet slept lightly. Then, on a quiet cycle, something unexpected happened. A ship arrived. Not a warship. A civilian vessel, small, unarmed, and broadcasting its identity openly. It belonged to a species that had lost 3 worlds to early galactic expansion. They had watched Sol from afar, watched the Armada vanish, watched the warnings be ignored and proven real. They requested permission to enter human space. The request went unanswered for nearly a full rotation. Then Sol responded, not with coordinates, with a question. Why are you here? The ship's captain answered honestly. Because we want to survive. The silence stretched. Then a corridor opened, narrow, precise, temporary. The ship was allowed through. Across the galaxy, the act went unnoticed by most. But not by the purists. They saw what it meant immediately. Humanity was no longer just defending itself. It was choosing. The commander watched reports filter in from fringe intelligence networks. Small species began seeking human contact. Not alliances, not protection, but understanding. How to build permanence. How to avoid extinction in a galaxy that rewarded aggression. Humanity did not offer weapons. They offered methods, principles, patience. The purists panicked. If humanity became a template instead of a singular anomaly, then the old order would collapse completely. They accelerated their plans. This time, they did not aim at Sol. They targeted an anchor system far from Earth. One of the quiet ones humanity rarely spoke about. A dead star. An empty system. Nothing worth defending. The purists believed that destroying one anchor would prove the lattice was vulnerable. They launched a covert strike. Precision, overwhelming, fast. The anchor activated. Not violently. It sent a signal. In Sol, Earth's deep systems woke instantly. Phase 5 did not mobilize fleets. It rerouted attention. The human envoy appeared, this time not as a warning, but as a statement. You have misunderstood something fundamental, he said, his voice calm, almost regretful. You think these systems exist to protect us. Behind him, the image shifted to the attacked anchor system. Space bent, not inward, but outward. The purest strike force found itself displaced, scattered across light years. Their formation dissolved into isolation. No ships were destroyed. No lives taken. Just separation. You are wrong, the envoy continued. They exist to protect the future. The purist leaders screamed accusations across open channels. You are deciding who survives. No, the envoy replied. We are deciding who threatens survival. The galaxy watched again. Not in awe this time. In quiet realization. Humanity was not acting as judge or ruler. It was acting as a filter. Aggression that sought dominance was being gently, inexorably removed from relevance. The purest movement collapsed within weeks, not because it was crushed, but because it could no longer coordinate. Its leaders were isolated. Its fleet scattered. Its ideology starved of momentum. In the aftermath, the galaxy changed in ways no one had predicted. Wars became smaller, rarer, less ambitious. Conquest lost its appeal when permanence could not be challenged. Humanity did not expand its territory, but its influence spread anyway, through example, through architecture, through the simple truth that extinction was no longer an acceptable cost of pride. The commander retired. On his final day of service, he stood alone before a viewport, watching the stars drift slowly past. They looked the same as they always had, but he knew better now. Somewhere among them were anchors, frameworks, quiet guardians that did not sleep. Humanity had not taken control of the galaxy. It had changed the rules by which the galaxy existed. And in Sol, beneath blue skies and moving oceans, humanity prepared for the only remaining uncertainty. Not invasion, not war, but the moment when someone, somewhere, would decide they were willing to risk extinction anyway. The galaxy never announced the new era. There was no treaty, no council vote, no moment where leaders stood together and declared peace. It simply settled. Borders stopped moving. Fleets stopped growing. Expansion doctrines quietly disappeared from military academies, replaced by words that once would have been laughed out of the room. Sustainability, restraint, permanence. Not because humanity enforced them, because humanity had proven something no civilization ever had before, that survival could be engineered. Years passed. Children were born on worlds that had once expected orbital bombardment as a natural stage of history. Traders crossed regions that had been war zones for centuries. Old enemies spoke again, not with trust, but with caution. And always, in the background, there was Sol. Not visible, not threatening, present. The anchors never expanded. Humanity did not claim new systems. The lattice remained exactly as it was the day the Armada died. That frightened some leaders more than any fleet ever could. In private chambers, the question returned again and again. What happens if humans disappear? What happens if they choose to act? What happens if we are wrong about their restraint? The answers never came. Humanity did not explain itself further. The human envoy retired from public contact. The broadcasts stopped. The relays fell silent. Earth returned to being just another blue world, beautiful, distant, and unreachable. Until one day, far beyond Sol, something went wrong. A star collapsed early. Not naturally. A civilization on its edge, young, ambitious, and desperate, had attempted to replicate fragments of human architecture without understanding it. They had tried to bend permanence to their own will. The result was catastrophic. The star destabilized, threatening to collapse into a destructive cascade that would wipe out dozens of nearby systems. Panic erupted. Fleets scrambled. Scientists screamed across channels. Councils argued while evacuation estimates climbed into the billions. And then, quietly, the lattice reacted. Not from Sol. From an anchor no one remembered existed. Space around the dying star thickened. Energy was redirected. Time slowed in a carefully measured bubble that bought days where there should have been seconds. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Humanity did not speak. They acted. The collapse was stabilized. The star cooled. The system survived, scarred, altered, but alive. Only then did a message appear. Brief. Simple. Do not copy what you do not understand. We will not save you twice. It was the first human message in years. And it was enough. The lesson spread faster than fear ever had. Humanity was not a shield for reckless ambition. It was a boundary against annihilation. The commander, older now, slower, but still sharp, watched the reports from a quiet world he had chosen for his final years. He had refused honors, refused statues, refused to be remembered as a hero or a villain. He knew the truth. He had been a messenger, a survivor allowed to leave so the galaxy could learn what survival really meant. On his last day, he requested one thing: a single transmission to Sol. It was not a challenge, not an apology, not a plea, just a statement. You were right, he said. We mistook noise for strength, motion for progress, power for permanence. The reply came hours later. Not from Earth. From the lattice itself. A signal so faint it barely registered. Acknowledged. That was all. The commander smiled and closed his eyes, content in the knowledge that his species would survive, not because it was strongest, but because it had finally learned when to stop. Across the galaxy, historians struggled to name what humanity had become. Guardians. Architects. Sentinels. None of the words felt correct. Because humanity did not watch over the galaxy. It shaped the conditions in which the galaxy could exist. And in doing so, it accepted a burden no empire ever had before. To never fail. On Earth, life went on. Children played beneath open skies, unaware that their world was the keystone of a structure holding back extinction itself. Scientists refined systems not to make them stronger, but safer, less intrusive, more precise. The goal was not dominance. It was invisible, because the greatest success of the lattice would be the day no one thought about it at all. But deep beneath Earth's crust, in chambers older than any living memory, a final protocol remained active. Not a weapon, not a defense, a choice. If the galaxy ever reached a point where extinction was embraced again, where annihilation became acceptable, then humanity would not argue. It would not threaten. It would not warn. The lattice would disengage. Not violently. Completely. Removing humanity and its anchors from the galaxy in a single irreversible act. Leaving the stars to whatever future they chose. That protocol had never been discussed publicly. It was never broadcast. Because true responsibility did not require an audience. Humanity had built the lattice not to rule forever, but to give the galaxy a chance to grow beyond the need for extermination. And if that chance was ever rejected, humanity was prepared to leave. The final truth settled quietly among the stars, unspoken but absolute. Humanity did not wipe out an armada to prove its strength. It did so to prove that extinction was a line, and that some lines, once drawn, must never be crossed again.